In a future that has long since forgotten its past, where warriors made of steel and gold wield the mightiest firearms and sharpest blades, where the power of the void is harnessed by the strongest and most skilled fighters the Origin system has ever seen, you have awakened. Welcome to the Tenno Smithy. Greetings, my friends, and welcome to the channel. On today's episode, we're going to be laying a foundation for the study of the Tenno arsenal. One of the first things worth mentioning regarding Warframes, especially where melee weapons are concerned, are the Tenno Stances, which can be viewed as a specific set of martial arts moves the Tenno utilize when fighting hand-to-hand. One of the glaring weaknesses in these stances is that, for most weapons Tenno use, and unlike historical martial arts, Tenno moves adopt an all-in philosophy, where defense is almost completely ignored, wide swings are common, and fancy spinning moves make for a flashy, albeit lopsidedly offensive, fighting style. For most fighters, the Tenno stances would be a death sentence, leaving yourself open to a counterattack, whether by not adopting a stance where you can guard against incoming attacks, or by spinning and exposing your back, your sword arm, or your head to your opponent, are mistakes that most, if not all, historical martial artists are trained to steer away from, making most of the Tenno stances and moves historically inaccurate as a fighting style. The Tenno are, however, very unique among martial artists, as they possess several traits the average human fighter does not. Despite having a fully armored body, their metallic exterior has much the same flexibility as ordinary flesh and muscle, and unlike the vast majority of combatants they face, Warframes do not seem to have weak spots, where a greater amount of damage may be dealt with an accurate strike. This is likely due to the infestation used to create them, as the body of a Warframe is more accurately described as a single system, rather than a human body's network of systems working in tandem. Another unique Warframe trait to have an effect on their martial arts is their durability, which for many of them comes from an additional void energy shield that completely absorbs physical and elemental damage up to a certain threshold. And unlike modern shields found on a variety of Corpus troops and proxies, which frequently can't be recharged without returning to a purpose-built shield recharging cabinet, the Tenno shields can recharge on their own, in the field, with little downtime, theoretically giving their Warframes a limitless ability to absorb punishment. There are very few things in the Origin system capable of overcoming these shields on their own, and given the frantic speed most Tenno are known to fight with, even fewer opponents are able to land a telling blow on a Warframe at all, generally having to rely on sheer mass of fire in their general direction to have any hope of scratching it. The next attribute would be the increased physical strength the Warframes are capable of exerting, far in excess of an ordinary human. They are able to grapple with larger and potentially heavier opponents and send them flying with ease, even barehanded, such as when dueling with a Kuva Lich, whose armor alone must be truly monumental in weight. All these traits, combined with a knowledge of the background of the Tenno, namely the Tenno schools, creates an understanding of why the Tenno fight the way they do. The children of the Zariman are said not to have joined existing schools, but to have founded their own. While this part is speculation, I think it's fair to say that, when they began to use Warframes, their own inexperience with fighting melded with the massive potential of their new toys to create a reckless fighting style that looks, to a trained eye, like a novice with super strength wildly swinging a weapon around in the most ridiculous flourishes and no thought for personal safety. One of the taunts from the Grineer Queens during the War Within, "You have some idea you're invincible, don't you?" sheds a bit more light on the topic. The more experienced you become with the enemies you're facing, the more powerful your weapons grow, and the more confident you become, it usually isn't long before you're wading through scores of enemies, chopping them down like autumn wheat, usually not paying much attention to your well-being until your shields break. Unless you're in Aros, and then you probably don't pay much attention to anything. The physical toughness, flexibility, general handling skill, speed, and strength of Warframes confounds all but the most dauntless enemies. You don't need to use your weapon or stance for defense if your own body can deflect most blows without harm. And if you have the strength to swing some of the most unusually massive weapons, such as the Fragor, you can also swing them with the confidence that nothing is going to be able to block, parry, or resist your blows. This naturally lends itself to a reckless fighting style, whose moves are focused on landing crippling hits that sever enemies into multiple pieces, or literally send them flying. Perfect for inexperienced fighters that don't have anyone to train them in the finer points of martial arts. The Tenno are not without defensive fighting styles, however. They have the dexterity and reflexes to use their blades to block or intercept the vast majority of incoming harm, whether it's deflecting bullets from a dozen Grineer Lancers with a pair of daggers flashing in the dark, to parrying a kick from a Bursa with a Galatine. There are even a set of mods that can enhance these abilities, making parrying easier, faster, and possible over a wider angle, or reflecting bullets back to their sender, so it isn't completely fair to write off all Tenno fighting styles as reckless. The vast majority of their frequent combat moves, however, focus on getting in, landing unstoppable hits, and counting on their shields and armor to absorb or deflect any damage dealt in return. Thus, a fighting style that would be a terrible detriment to an ordinary fighter becomes a lethal weapon in the hands of the Tenno. Someone who can fight with no regard for their own safety can accomplish feats impossible for another who is always on their guard. The quip, "We're immune to this infestation, but they'll still try to kill us," also reflects a complete disdain for the infested. Whether Grineer Marines or advanced Corpus robots, nothing is safe from the infestation except for the Tenno. So, situations where these others would be overcome and assimilated by the infestation, a Warframe confidently strides, knowing it can't be infected any more than it already is, and cuts, burns, and stomps the infested down with almost complete impunity. If a Warframe does take enough damage to stop functioning, the operator can simply jumpstart it 4 or more times per mission, and return it immediately to full fighting trim, or a squad mate can revive them with a unique pheromone-based gas that invigorates the infestation within the Warframe to get it back on its feet. Sometimes it really does seem like the Tenno have no real weaknesses. They have every tool at their disposal to overcome almost any difficulty, from the Parazon's ability to hack security systems with a speed that would make a Corpus tech faint, to rifles that can find a weak spot in any armor, to blades slathered in toxins that Corpus shields can't even absorb. Despite having a fighting style with relatively limited historical basis or application, the Tenno remain the most formidable warriors in the Origin system. And where a lone Tenno spells disaster for any place or foe they point their weapons at, a squad of them is practically an unstoppable apocalypse. A speeding whirlwind of blades, bullets, and void powers gutting any facility they pass through and leaving destruction and death in their wake. When you're this strong, this powerful, you don't need to worry about the conventional weaknesses of a mere fighting style.